Welcome to Freedom Lovin'. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 16. And in just a minute, I have an interview with Paul Rosenberg of freemansperspective.com, and really interesting chat had to have with him. We covered a lot of topics under the freedom sun, and stay tuned for that. And just an update for what I'm doing. Got a few days left in Boulder, Colorado, and then I'm going to be shipping out to San Diego. So I'll be heading out this weekend, and this is Labor Day weekend here for those of us in the land of the free. So I will be leaving here, I think, Sunday or Monday, and pulling into Southern California around Monday, Tuesday-ish. So looking forward to that, even though I'm going to miss a lot of things about being in Colorado and Boulder. Although today I just got pulled over right before I got back to record this. I was driving back home from a coffee shop where I was doing some work, and I got a little lost. I decided to take just a little bit different route, and then I got lost. And then I realized where I was, and I started heading the right direction. And then I got to this intersection where it was right turn only, but I was behind a truck, and he went left. I needed to go left. So I just kind of followed him. I saw it. Most of the time in Boulder, I'm pretty much a rules-obeying, traffic law-following citizen because there's so many cops here, and you just never know. So, but this time I was frustrated with the drive, and I just said, this guy's doing it, I'm going to do it. So I went. Sure enough, as soon as I went, there was a cop right behind me. And the cops here, a lot of them don't have the lights, so I didn't even see that it was a cop. I thought, is that a cop? It was a black car with no lights. And then, sure enough, she pulled me over. And she was actually very pleasant. And I was very pleasant as well. I didn't raise a stink. I just gave her all the info. And then she went back and wrote up the ticket, came back, and it was $125. And that's when I just said, wow, you guys are really sticking it to everyone around here. And she goes, oh, yeah, we do. And yeah, that's the problem. I don't like my job because I have to do that. So I didn't even know what to say to that. When she said that, I just got instantly angry. And then immediately afterwards, I thought, I should have said that, well, we all have a choice, right? I mean, she's telling me this like she doesn't have a choice. Like, that's just my job, just doing my job. I don't like it, but I'm doing my job. So anyway, I felt pretty enraged after that. So $125, I'll live, but I hate to send it into the local bureaucrats for them to play around with. So, but anyway, life goes on, and I try to stay positive and just focus on the stuff that I can control. And I can't control what's going on in the news. So I opened up my Facebook the other day, and I don't watch TV, so I didn't know that the Video Music Awards were going on. But apparently Miley Cyrus was a big hit. So that's some really important news that everyone should know. That I don't even know what happened, but I saw some pictures. And so that was the headline of the news. And then the next one was the Syria invasion, or the bombing of Syria that's about to happen. I guess the U.S. is going to unleash the military-industrial complex on Syria here in the next few days or so. And not at all surprising to me that this is happening, or that something along those lines are happening. I thought it was an interesting point that someone made, that the argument for the war, for doing some violence to the people in Syria, is that, well, they have a dictator there and he's gassing people. And some people are pointing out, well, yeah, there's other dictators right now in the world that are also gassing people. So why Syria? So it's like, that's just how they get people to, go along with this thing, is like, well, this guy's just evil and we have to stop him. And that's the beginnings of all these wars, and nobody wins here. A lot of innocent people will die and bloodshed. And some people will make money here in the U.S. off of selling defense missiles and things like that, and that's unfortunate, but that's just the world we live in, and it's tough to fight it with words or by doing Facebook posts or by holding up signs or anything like that. I think the only way that you can fight it is to just kind of ignore as much as possible all of that stuff. TV is just a complete waste, and even Facebook to me is turning into kind of a waste. I mean, I like it for some things, but when it comes to the political activism, I mean, I see all these peace signs, and it's like, that's not going to do anything, and it's kind of just a waste of time to I start to post something or to post a comment somewhere, and I'm like, I could be doing something more productive and helping change the world for the better by changing myself or working on something that is going to further my happiness or my freedom. So those are the two important things to me. So anyway, not to dwell on that too much, but if you do like this podcast, I would love it if you could give me a rating and review. I got an email just a little while ago from someone in Boulder that is a listener, or his brother, I guess, is a listener of the podcast, of Freedom Lovin', and wants to meet up, and that's awesome. I love to see that. So I'm going to give him a call, and hopefully we'll get a chance to meet before I get out of here. But if you're not in the area and you can't access me, if you can just go into freedomlovin.com and click on this podcast, and then I'll have a link to iTunes. And if you just give a quick rating and a review, that would be really helpful. So I hope you're having a great week. I guess by the time this podcast is posted, I will be rolling into Southern California Monday or Tuesday. Go have a great Labor Day weekend, have a barbecue, and celebrate labor or whatever it is we're supposed to celebrate. And go out there and build some freedom. And without further ado, here's my interview with Paul Rosenberg. All right. Well, I'm really excited to have Paul Rosenberg on the show today. Paul is an adventure capitalist with a broad range of interests and experiences under his belt. He's a driving force behind Crypto Hippie, which is a solution for guarding your identity on the internet, and is the author of the book, A Lodging of Wayfaring Men. He also has a blog at freemansperspective.com. Paul, welcome to Freedom Lovin'.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So, can you talk a little bit about Crypto Hippie, and when did that start, and what was your motivation in starting that?
Well, I'll tell you the story. It's actually not just me. I'm one of the people at Crypto Hippie, not the main,
Sure.
the only force. Anyhow, the story goes back to 2005. I had written the novel that you mentioned earlier, A Lodging of Wayfaring Men, and when I originally published it, it was anonymous for a variety of reasons. So let's say 2005, early 2005, I was hanging around on a particular kind of cypherpunk IRC chat. And you get to know people pretty well when you hang out on these things for any, consistent period of time. And there was one particular gentleman who I talked to a lot, and we got to like each other quite a bit and trusted each other. And at one day he says to me, "You wrote that book, didn't you?" And I, of course, said, "Which book would that be?" And he says, "Come on." He says, "Come on, you wrote it, didn't you?" And At the point, I trusted him. And I said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Look, we need to talk." And at the time, I was living in Amsterdam, and he was living in Germany. So we got together, and we drove around for 5 days and talked about everything under the sun. And at the end of the trip, he says to me, he says, "Look," he says, "freedom has to exist somewhere. There has to be some place, some way for people to communicate in freedom." And I said, "Yes, it does. I completely agree." And he says, "I know how to do it," which he did. This gentleman is a real cryptography expert. I mean, he's really, really good at what he does. And I said, "Yes, I know you do know how." And he says, "But I can't do it myself, and I want you to do it with me." So, what do you say? You think about it and swallow, and then you got to say yes. So that's how Crypto Hippie was really born. It took us some time. It has a very special sort of architecture on the corporate side. Crypto Hippie isn't one company, it's actually several. So the one that I manage is a sales company. I never, ever see network data. And the network operators never, ever see sales data. So there's never enough information in one place at one time to really be worth grabbing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So, and I saw that there was a Crypto Hippie USA and then one in Panama?
Correct. Panama's the network.
Okay. Yeah. Why Panama? Is that an easy place to set up a business, or?
Yeah, it's a fairly good corporate headquarters sort of place. Definitely non-U.S., but but still, manageable as a corporate headquarters. It worked for us. It was easy enough to set up.
Yeah, cool. So now, what exactly is CryptoHippie for people that don't know or aren't familiar with, VPNs and things like that?
Sure. CryptoHippie, it's an anonymity network or with a VPN on the front end. What that means is that we use all of the cryptography and, let's call them white hat hacker tricks to preserve your anonymity, and we put them in a system that an average person can use. You download, one thing and you set it up. It doesn't take very long, and you're good. There are other ways to do it. I mean, you can get all of the, crypto tools, Tor and GPG and Pigeon and OTR and all of the others, and do it yourself, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So CryptoHippie just, does it for you.
Yeah, especially these days, that's really something that's needed. And especially with, I think now, I don't know if you've noticed any difference since the whole Edward Snowden thing came out, or is there a bigger demand for tools like this?
Yeah, there's definitely a bigger demand. It didn't go, insane after the Snowden revelations, but it definitely, interest went up. Yeah.
That makes sense. Do you know much about the situation with LavaBit? I was just reading about that the last couple of days, and how the guy just closed down.
Yeah, LavaBit was secure email service. One of the things that we do. I didn't really get into the intricacies of his system. I never really looked at it deeply, but as far as I can tell, it was a pretty decent system. It had, solid cryptography. It did a decent job for their clients. And evidently, Edward Snowden had an address there and used it at some point. And the powers that be, they jumped on that, all over. And they evidently, now I don't really know this exactly, but it's pretty certain. These guys paid some sort of visit to the gentleman who ran this company. His name was Levison. He was in Texas, which, again, that's why we don't have servers, in the United States.
Yeah.
Or corporate structure in the United States,
Right.
The sales office, but not the network. And so they came to him, and apparently what happened is that they had some sort of national security letter, because I say this because he's not allowed to talk about it, and that's pretty clear indication that there was one of these national security letters issued by a secret court, which I still almost choke on those words. I grew up, a good American boy, and secret courts were in the Soviet Union, not here.
Of course. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
it is. So changed quite a bit.
Oh, it's amazing. It's just stunning. But anyhow, with LavaBit, so apparently what the gentleman did is that he said, the NSA must have come to him and said, we want everything, keep this thing, going, we want everything on everybody. And he said, honorably, he said, I sold these people privacy, and I'm just shutting it down. And, for which I really applaud the gentleman. I don't think I've ever met him, but someday I hope to and shake his hand and thank him.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's more American than anything, right?
Boy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool stuff. Now, okay, so we've talked about freedom. Your blog is Freeman's Perspective, and mine is freedomlovin.com.
Right.
And for you, what does freedom mean?
It's a funny thing, but my definition of freedom, I can do it a lot fancier now, but the definition of freedom is the same one, really, that I came up with on my own when I was maybe 16. And I didn't really think of it in that moment. I was pretty young. In terms of freedom, I thought about, what should I do? What's right and what's wrong and why? And my conclusion was, I should be able to do anything I want as long as I don't bother anybody.
Right.
And, now I would, say it, something more like, freedom is a condition in which an individual's will regarding his own person and property are unopposed by any other will, which is, nice for an intellectual, but the 16-year-old kid's definition was the same thing. Yeah,
that works. It's a simple concept, but it gets kind of convoluted with all the propaganda out there and media and schools and everything else. So it's
oh yeah, people really tear that definition apart because they try to add things into it. They say, well, no, but you're not free if you have to whatever. If you can't, if you don't have enough money, or if you don't have access to whatever it is. But they really are complicating it, and probably in a lot of cases because they really don't want to face the real definition, which is, the same thing that John Locke said, the same thing that Thomas Jefferson said, the same thing that hundreds of people have said over the years, is you should be able to do whatever you want as long as you're not harming anybody else. I mean, that's just basic morality, and it's true now, it's true at 5000 BC, it'll be true in 5000 AD.
That's right, yeah, and we could shorten the Constitution and just have that and cut out everything else, and I think it would be a lot easier to live.
It would actually make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm really into the idea of entrepreneurship, and I know you are too. I read one of your blog posts from a couple of years ago, and it was about the idea of the entrepreneurial model versus the institutional model of business. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you were trying to get across there?
Yeah, what has been happening for the last... I began to notice it in the 80s, so I'm not sure, how far back it goes. But you look at the numbers long-term of self-employed people, and they're just going down, 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 down. Institutions have a way of growing and spreading and taking up everything they can and choking everything else out. That's just what they do. It's part of the structure. That's just the way it is until they collapse. What's happened in business is there used to be a lot of areas where you could be an independent, and independents work better. They produce better. They can adapt faster. They can see what's going on and make decisions now rather than running it through a chain of command that takes 14 months to make a decision. Individuals or small companies are much, much better in a real wide variety of ways. But what has happened is that bit by bit they've been pushed out. One of the great enemies of entrepreneurship are professional regulation laws, which are in most cases just restraint of trade done by an organization and, again, another institution. I actually knew the last engineer who was licensed in the state of Illinois without going to college. That's how recent that was. I actually knew the gentleman. But it used to be lawyers, doctors, surgeons didn't have to go to college. They had to convince people in the business that they knew what they were doing, but that was entirely merit. They didn't need a certificate stamped by some sort of authority. They just had to be good. And that's long gone in most areas. It's mostly gone in the construction business, which was one of the last bastions that a poor boy could get started and do well in. And there's a lot of certificates and such required now, more than there used to be. And it's really a problem. It chokes people out, and then the only way they can survive is to get a job with a big corporation, which, essentially chokes the life out of them step by step, but they have no choice because they have to eat.
Yeah. That's right.
It's really gotten bad that way. I had a random conversation yesterday with a nice lady who was taking a job that she didn't particularly love and really didn't want to work. She was older, and she would, I think, rather have been home tending to her family and grandchildren and such, but they needed the insurance. And her husband was an independent. He was actually in the construction business. And when you're self-employed and you have insurance, they squeeze you hard. Yeah. And she had to take this job for a big outfit just because she needed the insurance. And there are millions of stories like that, and people are just getting squeezed out, and the institutions are really running the show. There hasn't been an institutional time like this that I can point to back since the 1950s, where the institutions were, God, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true. And now, what would you do? I mean, in this day and age, we have all these issues like you described. What do you do now? I mean, what's the best path to creating, a business or some sort of financial freedom where you can feel like you're, kind of getting ahead?
Yeah, it's really rough right now. There are still areas that are available. There are a lot of small little niches in all sorts of fields, working as a consultant, providing some special kind of product, doing some special sort of service. There's things that haven't yet been regulated.
Yeah.
In the construction business is still a fairly good one. The licensing requirements are fairly easy to comply with. Again, provided that you care enough to work and be good at what you do. I mean, if you're not going to do that, you're not going to succeed anywhere except a corporation.
Yeah.
But, as an independent, you have to be better. You have to work harder. You have to provide better service. You have to be more honest with your customers than the big corporation. They can get away with almost anything because they're working on special situations where they have essentially a monopoly or a near monopoly or a government contracts or things like that. That's what they go for. They go for special situations like that. And, they pay politicians to give them special privileges. It's an old story, but it's really big right now. Yeah,
absolutely. Would you suggest leaving the country? I had Jeff Berwick on the show
a couple
weeks ago. Yeah, and he's big on just getting out. USA is a sinking ship, and you might as well move to South America and have a little bit of freedom versus, getting caught up in all the nonsense that's going on here.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting question, and it's a complicated answer. If you think you're going to be a target in the United States with this insane surveillance stuff that's going on, you really should start thinking about exit plans. The interesting thing about going somewhere else, and I've lived other places, kind of have come and gone a couple of times. When you're going to move somewhere else, you really need to go there first. Not permanently, just go and spend 3 months, 6 months, and actually live in this place. It's not enough to take a vacation and say, oh yeah, it was a wonderful place, the people were nice, let's move. You have to live there for a while because it's a different experience. So, that's something that I think is very important. There's just too many stories of people who, ignored such ideas and lived to regret it, at a very high cost. But it's not a bad plan to get away somewhere else, provided that you like the place and provided that the situation there is not worse. I'll give you an example. A beautiful place and a nice place to live in a lot of ways is Italy. But Italy's got real problems, not just the financial stuff where the wheels really are coming off, but their government system is still very fascist. They do things that we couldn't imagine even here. They have financial police who walk around with guns and walk into companies and say, show us your books now.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, you can't believe this is true, but when you're there, you see all these cars in the street. It's, Financia something or another, and Carboneri, Financia something. And they're financial cops with guns, and they go into businesses, and they don't exactly shake them down, but sometimes they do, and they definitely intimidate and want to see their books and clamp down on everybody. Yeah. So, when you go to these other places, you really need to know what you're going into and what really is the situation there. And the other thing that people forget, and it's really important, is that your real first line of defense in real life are your neighbors.
Right.
And, friends and neighbors account for a lot. So if you're going to go overseas, it's important that you live in a place where you like the people and they can accept you and understand you. But all that said, when you go overseas as a foreigner, you have a lot of advantages. Let's take again Italy. They go after their own guys real hard, the financial police, but if they come to you and say, hey, who are you? Say, hey, I'm an American. Oh, okay. All right, get out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're left alone a lot more as the outsider in a lot of important ways, and that's really a benefit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's one of the places I've been to over in Asia is Thailand, and it has kind of a reputation of being a little bit more free. And I've heard even some of the bloggers and some of the guys that I read and listen to are saying, well, Thailand's one of the freest countries in the world. And then just a couple weeks ago, the government of Thailand was cracking down on people that went on Facebook and liked a post that maybe was critical of the government.
Yeah. Yeah, especially of the king, for whatever reason it is over there in Thailand. If you, do anything to question the king, boy, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, you can get in trouble even if you drop some coins on the ground and you step on them, and if, the coins have the king on them, and if you step on the coin, that's against the law, so you can get in trouble.
For real, huh?
Yeah, it's a really bizarre place. I mean, and in some ways it is pretty free. I mean, they like tourists, they like to encourage that, and there's a lot of good things about Thailand, but it's definitely not, I don't see myself living there. I think that would be a step down in terms of over freedom with all that going on. But like you said, as a tourist, a lot of places can be appealing.
Right, and there are a lot of places that are very different. You can usually find a place that works for you. It used to be, for example, guys who wanted to smoke pot, and you could say, well, go to Amsterdam, live there, and you can go to the coffee shops every day and smoke pot, and you won't get in trouble. Don't do it in New York City because they're going to drag you away and put you in a cage.
Yeah. Yeah, well, actually, here in Colorado, they made it legal on the state level, and it's interesting because I've only been here a couple months, but you don't see it out in public. It's just like everywhere else. It's still kind of hidden, and people aren't, out there lighting up in public. And what it is, I think, is it's just kind of still there's that idea that, well, it's illegal at the federal level, and also it's really not like this big free market in pot. The government decided to tax it, I think, at like 35%. So It's all underground. There's not much of a market, from what I understand, above ground. So it's all kind of still black market. So
interesting. I know they do that in California a lot, and I know Colorado just passed it, but it was pretty recent.
Yeah, that was, I think, earlier this year. So another thing I want to ask you about is one thing that I'm really into is Bitcoin. What do you think about Bitcoin? You think that's going to take off here soon? You think it'll save us and give us more freedom, or?
Well, first of all, I love Bitcoin. I mean, I love Bitcoin. And not so much for just what the currency is, although I like that a lot too, but the fact that thousands of young people primarily are getting active over this thing. They're meeting in cafes and Starbucks and buying it and selling it. They're, over-the-counter dealers in every city in America almost.
Yeah.
And people are writing new programs for it. They're adapting it. They're going into local businesses and saying, look, we want you to accept Bitcoin. I'll give you more business if you take it. Just, independent people who care enough to get up and act and, not just talk, but act and do something. This is really exciting to me for that reason. But I do also like the currency a lot. It's got challenges in front of it. There are a lot of problems in front of Bitcoin. I don't think it's going to go away. But there are two primary attacks on Bitcoin going on right now. The one that everyone sees is, governments and central banks who are freaking out over it. And I love, it could be used by drug dealers. These people really, they have to be arrogant to the point of delusion sometimes, because HSBC and Wells Fargo Wachovia, and just in the last few years, were caught laundering hundreds of billions of dollars for violent drug cartels. And what did these magnificent public servant central bankers and regulators do? Nothing. They gave them some minor fine. Nobody lost their job. Nobody went to jail. And this is hundreds of billions of dollars for known violent drug cartels. And then they're going to complain about Bitcoin, which is a tiny, tiny fraction of what this is. Just the Bitcoin total, not to mention, I don't know what tiny percentage of bad guys using it is, not much.
What are most drugs, illegal drugs? What do people use to buy them now? I mean,
dollars.
They pay for money.
Euros, yen,
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So, the duplicity of this whole thing is just stunning. You just wonder how long it'll be that people can actually give these people the benefit of the doubt at every possible turn. When do you say, well, maybe they're not automatically saints?
Right, exactly.
Right. Anyhow, so that's the one set of attacks on Bitcoin. The other problem, in my mind, are the venture capitalists. There are a lot of Silicon Valley types who are trying to put money into Bitcoin, and I'm glad that they like it, but I'm not sure they like it for the right reason. I think they see it as a way to get rich, to get in on the ground floor of something, and they're eagerly, proactively working with the governments and the banks to try to regulate this thing so that it can be taxed and it can be, surveilled like everything else. And they just want to be essentially the, guys in the first round, so they get a lot of money out of it. Essentially, they're turning it into something like a decentralized PayPal.
Yeah, that does sound exciting to me. It's like, I've been reading about there's kind of a division in the Bitcoin communities with people that are saying, let's bring on regulation and let's have more of it because it'll make it more legitimate. And then there's everyone else that just wants it to, was intended to be, which is currency that has anonymity. So. Yeah.
Those are the problems right now. Some people are saying, well, look, I've had people say, Paul, don't worry. What's going to happen is that they're going to get this thing and they're going to get some of these regulations in, but there'll be two sides of the market. There will be the public market where, all these guys can have their regulated things, but then there will always be the people that are using, Bitcoin as it was originally intended at the same time. And I appreciate that, and I'm sure that will happen to some significant degree, but the type of tracking technologies that can be done now with the NSA and with computers having the capabilities that they have these days, there are different types of tracking that can be done that are pretty effective. So, I'm not sure what becomes of that. But back to my original point, we have these thousands of people who love this and are trying to do something, and they're going to keep adapting. And I'm very eager to see what comes next.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of businesses are being started around Bitcoin, and all the services businesses. I think it's an exciting place to be. I think it'll be an interesting time as we move forward with this.
Boy, that's the truth, and it is. It's a very exciting thing. These are freelance people who are using their own talent, their own mind, their own will, and that's just so much more entertaining, so much more instructive. So it's being alive. And you compare that to the work-a-day in your corporate cubicle. My God, who would want to live, the corporate cubicle life when you can live the Bitcoin life?
Yeah.
I mean, I know people, they do it. They feel they're stuck. They have 2 kids and they need the salary. I understand. But given a choice, would you rather actually live and have an exciting life, or would you rather sit in a cubicle? I mean, please.
Yeah, I definitely decided that a while ago. So there was an article I read, I don't know what it was, a couple weeks ago in Reason, and it was about, is there such a thing as privacy online now, or privacy with email, or any of this? As one of the driving forces of Crypto Hippie, what's your take on that?
Well, there is privacy if you work for it. If you're going to just, use Google and Facebook, forget about it. They got everything. They got psychological profiles already developed on you. They know what you're going to do Tuesday morning. And, I mean, they do. They were bragging about this 3-4 years ago. And they've got all sorts of, tracking systems built into all that. So if you're just going to do that, forget about it. They got everything on you, and they can make you look like a creep anytime they want.
Sure.
But if you want to work for it, you can have privacy still. They closed down LavaBit, but they haven't closed down a lot of other things. Again, there's, 2 ways to do it. One is that you can get all the various tools. The big one that most people use now is called Tor, which is an onion routing system, which is, I don't think I want to take the time to explain. Yeah. But it works fairly easily. It's very, very slow. So, if you're going to use Tor, you got a trade-off. You can't zoom through the internet at lightning speed and still be private. You could do pretty well if you use my service, but that's a different thing. So there are all these tools you can use if you want to learn to use them. And I recommend that people do anyway. It's better to have that. Or you can use our system, and until the day they really start pulling everything offline that is not theirs. It'll be there. And, for a pretty reasonable price, you get really, really, really good protection. And it's a whole lot faster than Tor. Not quite as fast as your regular surfing, but not too bad.
Yeah. And one of the discussions I heard on the podcast Let's Talk Bitcoin was about if you are using the tools to make yourself, the encryption tools to make yourself private online, is that a red flag to people that are, like the NSA people that are spying what you're doing? Is that going to be a red flag? Like, look, these people are all going into these encrypted services, so they must be suspicious. So let's track them a little more.
Yeah, it's not really true. Most of the time that's said, it's just people who are kind of afraid or occasionally people trying to make others afraid. There's actually a term it's called FUD, F-U-D, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But the thing is, a lot of people use those things. Corporations use them. The VPN technology is used by, hundreds of corporations. So the traffic that your local ISP sees, for example, it could be just a corporate network that you're going into. They really wouldn't know. But if the NSA wants to, they can pretty much search anything they want, and they can tell what service you're using and things like that. They just can't, if it's a good service, they can see you're connecting to it, but they can't see any more.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth doing and getting, set up with all that. And it's a minor inconvenience to save yourself. And just even the feeling, it's like whatever, you're just talking about the weather. The idea of somebody listening in and spying and reading your emails is just pretty insane, and especially when you hear about what Snowden did and what he was able to access, it makes me feel uncomfortable just knowing that.
Oh, it's creepy. Actually, the guy who used to be boss of Google, a guy named Eric Schmidt, he made a lot of comments in public that I was pleased that he said it in public at least, but they were really wild. One of the things he says is, what we're doing here at Google is we're going right up to the line where people think it's really creepy, and then we'll stop and wait for a while, and then we'll go, when the line moves further, we'll go up right to the point where they think it's really creepy again, then we'll pull back just a little bit and just keep doing that. I mean, the guy admitted it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The thing about a lot of this stuff is what Edward Snowden revealed. The important part of it was that it got a lot of publicity, that people actually know about this. Yeah. But people in the business, we knew about this stuff years and years ago. It's just the average guy knew nothing. One of the great stories was from 2004. I mean, there was a lawsuit over this that AT&T built a room in their main facility in San Francisco, and God only knows how many others, where they called it the NSA room. And they gave the NSA access to the complete fiber optic feeds.
Wow.
And this is in 2004.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you talked about it back then, people would start making comments like, oh, you're wearing a tinfoil hat, or, it's like, that's insane, that doesn't happen. And now you talk to the average person, and they're like, oh, yeah, for sure. They don't doubt it at all.
And it's a funny thing. I talked to somebody just the other day, and I wasn't bringing up the subject particularly, but they asked me something about what I did or something like that. And I explained, what I'm doing, and instantly they lower their voice and say, yeah, I know, it's really scary. So, God, I hope they don't come after me. I mean, I really don't do anything, but you never know. They can get you for anything now. And instantly they lower their voice. What does that tell you? What are we living under? Is this freedom?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I've experienced that too. It's not.
Yeah, it's a wild thing. I mean, we all do it sometimes, but it's, you go, gee, what are we saying when we do this?
Yeah, exactly. I remember as a kid just growing up and hearing about the stories about communism and how you visited the Soviet Union or Cuba, your hotel room would be bugged. And so they would listen to whatever's going on in your hotel room. It was so horrifying. And thinking that it's way beyond that here now. I mean, hotel rooms, that's nothing. That's,
right.
That's like everything we did.
As they say, de rigueur. It's everything. And, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal today, where they were talking about how much the NSA can get 75% of everything that goes on in America. Nah, sorry. The chart that they had was fine, and that's really nice. But just getting the backbone traffic, like this room in the AT&T facility, that's at least 75% there.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's more like 95. It's maybe, it's probably close to 100. Data center, the monster that they're building, it's done, I guess, in Utah. Depending on how you run the numbers and, which engineer runs the numbers, there's something that facility can store and search quickly anything between 10 and 100 years of world internet traffic.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what's coming and going out of that place, not to mention the probably 11 or more acres of computers that the NSA has underneath Fort Meade, and God only knows what else, not to mention the CIA, the DIA, the DHS, the FBI, and probably several others whose names we don't know so well.
Yeah, that's right. That's interesting. So, yeah, now I wanted to get into your blog. What's kind of your goal with Freeman's Perspective in terms of, I know you have a newsletter and you're putting out a lot of information, a lot of great stuff out there. And so what's your goal there?
Well, it's actually kind of a twofold thing. First of all, the newsletter, and then the free articles. So, what we do with the free articles is try to really cover things that really matter, that are important, that people should know, and hopefully, do it in a way that's easy to understand, to communicate it well, and to give people things that really help them, and as many as possible. The newsletter itself, it's a monthly newsletter. It's a pay newsletter. And really what that one is, oh gosh, after all the years I've been, doing the freedom stuff, there's all sorts of really important, interesting things that really are unknown. Mm-hmm. So what I try to do every month in the newsletter is to find something that's really interesting and that's really important and that nobody has ever heard before, and put it into an article once a month. Let me give you an example. This was a fun one. 2 months ago, I guess, we did an article on this magnificent archaeological find in what is now central Turkey that between, let's call it roughly 7,400 BC and 6,000 BC, so a long time ago. The pyramids are closer to us than they are to these guys. I mean, that's how far back it goes. They're the very first real city after the Ice Age. Right now, nowadays it's called Çatalhöyük. No one knows what it was originally called. This city, was home to 8,000, 10,000 people. We're not exactly sure. And there was no governance at all. There were no government buildings. There were no tax collectors. There were nothing. It was just thousands of people living together peacefully for 1,400 years.
Wow. And
nobody knows this story.
No, yeah, you hear about Iceland, and I think Ireland had something like that, and a little bit in the early days of America, but yeah, I haven't heard this one. That's interesting.
It's not unknown. It's not a secret. You can find information about it, but nobody really knows this story, and it's a great, great story.
Yeah, that's really cool stuff.
Yeah, so, those are the types of things we try to do in the newsletter. It's everything from history to philosophy, whatever we can find that's really interesting and important, but nobody knows.
Right. Yeah, that's cool stuff. I like the way you're putting it in terms of, kind of alerting people to this stuff, but not doing it in kind of an Alex Jones way where it's like,
right.
you're screwed and there's nothing you can do and this is it and everything, world's coming apart and this is more
we try to be positive because there's enough negatives on there. Actually, I'll tell you the story. This month that's, right now, I was going to do an issue on surveillance and the history of surveillance and what really has gone on and how it has affected people. Not, the Snowden programs, not that sort of thing, but the history of what really this is and how it really affects people and how it destroys and historical examples and things like that. I got the thing halfway written and realized that it was really pretty darn dark. So I didn't want to make it one of my regular newsletter issues because the newsletter issues we write about what we can be, what we can do, what, making life better the tagline we use is how life, liberty, and sanity can win. So what I had to do is I had to take the surveillance and turn it into, it's just a free report we sent to the subscribers because I couldn't do it as a regular issue. So we just gave them a freebie.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm actually, I think I'm going to have to subscribe. And I'm not a subscriber right now, but it sounds like really helpful stuff as opposed to, just fear-mongering. So.
Right. I mean, I appreciate guys pointing out what's going on bad in the world. That really does matter. But, gosh, there's so much of it. And if you kind of major on it, the point is not just to escape what's bad in the world. I mean, that's necessary. Right. I'm not trying to belittle that. But the point is to live and to become, more than you are, to expand yourself, to expand your world, to be more, not just to get away from, the bad guys. Yeah,
that's a great point. I totally agree. And that's kind of what I focus on, too, with the stuff I'm writing about and talking about. So that's awesome. Okay. So do you have what are your plans now ongoing? Are you sticking around the USSA or?
I'm really not sure. I had to come back for family reasons the last time. And so I'm not sure, what will come next. We're debating that right now. It's tough when you have a lot of family that you care about a great deal. If they're sick, if there's a problem, well, you're going to come back and take care of them. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of trade-offs. So I'm not sure what we're going to do next.
Yeah.
I just want to run my company and write my newsletter and have friends and be nice.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's about. If we could shake off some of these spies and things like that, that would be a nice little bonus too.
Oh, and once we get through this next period of however many years or decades it is, with the insane surveillance, the out-of-control military-industrial intelligence complex. I mean, it's fascism. Let's just, be honest. We're living in a neo-fascist state. People don't like that because they don't think it can happen here. But it has already happened here. It's here now. But once we get through this, once authority dies the death, we're golden. I mean, there's really bright future ahead for us all. It's not going to be perfect. There's always going to be, problems and people doing stupid things. But the future, once we get through the tyranny, the future is golden.
Yeah, I agree. I think hopefully sooner than later, but that's
right. Amen.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cool. Paul, it's been great having you on the show. I think the listeners are going to get a lot out of this one. And again, it's Paul Rosenberg, and his site is freemansperspective.com. And I'll put the links in the show notes to also to Crypto Hippie and everything else we covered. So
great. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And good luck to you. And I hope to keep in touch. I'd love to, I follow your blog and I'd love to, maybe have you on again. I know you're a big history buff, so there's a lot of stuff we could cover.
Sounds fun. I'll be around.